2 in the morning. Highway 41, rest stop. Danny asleep beside me on the bench seat, breathing slow and easy under a threadbare blanket. A black Lincoln pulled into the empty lot. Headlights swept across the frost on my windshield. Linda's Locket caught the light from the rearview mirror. The woman who stepped out wore a tailored coat. The state attorney. By the look of her, her hands stayed visible, her pace steady. Not a cop. Not a predator. She stopped at my window. "Mr. Lindgren, Theodore Vance is dying. He left you 8 commercial buildings. $32,000 a month. Quick favor, hit subscribe and comment your city and time. It helps the channel, and I love reading them." My name is Curt Lindgren, 67 years old. Retired construction foreman. Father to a brain-injured son. Widower. The woman in the tailored coat had driven away hours ago. Her taillights had disappeared into the dark stretch of Highway 41, and I'd sat there all night with her words hanging in the truck cab. Theodore Vance. 8 commercial buildings. $32,000 a month. Danny shifted on the bench seat beside me, mumbling something in his sleep. His hand found the edge of the blanket and pulled it tighter under his chin. He'd always been a restless sleeper, even before the accident. Even when he was a boy. I reached for the glove compartment. Past Emma's crayon drawings. My granddaughter's stick figures labeled Grandpa and Uncle Danny holding hands. Past the registration papers. My fingers found the wooden box in the back corner. The brass plumb bob was cold when I lifted it out. My grandfather brought it from Sweden in 1912, used it for 50 years, building houses in Milwaukee. My father used it for 30 more. I'd used it for another 40. 3 generations of honest work, and I was sleeping in a truck at a rest stop. I ran my thumb along the plumb bob's weight. Smooth from decades of hands. When you hang a plumb bob, gravity does the work. The line falls true. No lies, no angles, just straight down, honest as physics. Theodore Vance. I hadn't thought about that name in 43 years. Chicago, 1983. Michigan Avenue construction site. I was 30 years old, working as foreman on a high-rise project. 30 men under me, 60-hour weeks, concrete dust in my lungs every night. It was a Tuesday in October. I remember because the Bears had won on Sunday, and the crew was still talking about it. I'd sent 2 men home for showing up hungover. We were pouring the 4th floor, and I didn't have time for mistakes. Around 2 in the afternoon, I went to check the drywall delivery behind the east stairwell. The sheets were stacked against the wall, covered in plastic. I pulled back the plastic to count the load. A wallet, leather, brown, wedged between the bottom sheet and the concrete floor. Someone must have dropped it when they stacked the delivery. I picked it up. Heavy. When I opened it, I understood why. $4,000 in cash. $100 bills, crisp and new. Business cards. A driver's license with a photo of a man in his 40s. Theodore Vance. Address in Lake Forest. $4,000. A man could do a lot with $4,000 in 1983. Pay off a car. Put a down payment on a house. Buy his wife something nice. I folded the wallet closed. After shift, I drove to the hotel listed on one of the business cards. The Roosevelt. Asked at the front desk for Theodore Vance. The clerk made a phone call, then pointed me toward the elevator. Vance answered his suite door in a silk robe, phone tucked between his shoulder and ear. He looked at me like I was there to fix the plumbing. I held out the wallet. He stopped talking, took the wallet, opened it, counted the cash. Something shifted in his face. His jaw loosened. He set down the phone. "Where did you find this?" "Job site. Michigan Avenue." "This money. You didn't take any of it?" "No." He reached back into the wallet and pulled out $200 bills. "A finder's fee?" I shook my head. It wasn't mine. You could have kept it. No one would have known. I would have known. He looked at me the way you look at something you don't understand. Something that doesn't fit the pattern. No one has ever done that, he said. In 30 years of business, not one person has returned something they could have kept. I shrugged. I should get home. My wife's waiting. I left him standing in that doorway with his $4,000. Never expected to hear his name again. Linda was 22 when I married her. I was the same age. 2 paychecks and a rented apartment on the south side. That was everything. She taught 2nd grade. I hauled lumber and mixed concrete. That first year, we saved every dollar we could. Linda packed my lunches. I fixed our own plumbing, our own wiring, our own everything. We didn't go to restaurants. We didn't take vacations. We saved. By 1982, we had enough for a lot in Wauwatosa. A modest lot, nothing fancy, but it had a maple tree in the back and good drainage. I built our house with my own hands. Every nail, every board, every wire in the walls. The smell of sawdust followed me home every night. I worked construction all day, then came home and worked construction all night. Linda brought me sandwiches at midnight. She held the flashlight when I couldn't hold it myself. 6 months, start to finish. A Cape Cod with a basement workshop and a small backyard. Linda planted roses along the south fence the day we moved in. Yellow roses. Her mother's favorite. I was 25 when I made foreman. Youngest in the company. The owner told me it was because I ran clean crews. Never skimped on materials. Never lied about timelines. Men wanted to work for me because they knew I'd have their backs. Danny was born in 1986. Jenna came 2 years later. Danny had my hands. Big, square, built for holding tools. By the time he was 8, he could identify a Phillips head from a flathead across the room. By 12, he was helping me in the workshop every Saturday. By 18, he was better with a table saw than most journeymen. Jenna had Linda's smile. Quick and bright. The kind that made you feel like you'd done something right. She wanted more than Wauwatosa, more than construction wages. She wanted college, a career, a different kind of life. I paid $120,000 for her education. 4 years at Marquette. Business degree. I worked overtime every week for 6 years to cover it. Never complained. Never hesitated. When Jenna brought Marcus Brennan home for Thanksgiving her junior year, I knew what he was within 5 minutes. Soft hands, expensive watch. Eyes that calculated while he smiled. His father ran a small construction firm. Decent reputation, nothing special. Marcus talked about taking over the business, expanding it, making it something big. He used words like leverage and scaling and market position. I didn't trust him, but Jenna loved him. Linda said, "Give him a chance." So I gave him a chance. They married when Jenna was 21. I gave the toast at the reception, welcomed him to the family. Meant it, or tried to. When Marcus asked for startup capital to expand Brennan Construction, I wrote him a check for $50,000. Family helps family. That's what Linda said. That's what I believed. When they needed a co-signer on their first house, I signed. My reputation opened doors at banks that wouldn't have looked at Marcus twice. 40 years of honest work meant something in Milwaukee. My name on a loan was a guarantee. Danny worked for me until he was 26, then took a job at Brennan Construction. Marcus needed skilled carpenters. Danny wanted to spread his wings. I didn't like it, but I didn't stop it. 10 years ago, I got a phone call at 2004-7 in the afternoon. Danny was being loaded into an ambulance. There had been an accident at a Brennan Construction warehouse project. A scaffold collapse. I drove to the hospital at 90 miles an hour. By the time I got there, they'd already taken him into surgery. 22-foot fall. Head trauma. Internal bleeding. A nurse told me to sit down, that it would be a while. Linda arrived 20 minutes later. We sat in those plastic chairs and held hands and didn't speak. 4 hours later, a surgeon came out. Danny would live. But, that word, but. Traumatic brain injury, damage to the frontal lobe. They wouldn't know the extent until he woke up. He woke up 3 days later, looked at me with eyes that didn't quite focus, said, "Hi, Dad," in a voice like a child's. The man I'd raised was gone. In his place was someone with Danny's face and a 7-year-old's mind. I asked Marcus what happened. He gave me a speech about unfortunate accidents and unforeseen circumstances. He talked about liability and insurance and legal procedures. He never once said sorry. Linda hired a lawyer. We filed a lawsuit. Negligence, defective materials, skipped safety inspections. The evidence was there. Workers who'd complained about the scaffold quality. Inspections that never happened. Marcus's lawyers buried us. 5 years of motions and delays. Depositions that went nowhere. Documents that disappeared. Witnesses who changed their stories. Our lawyers said they were bleeding us out, running up costs until we couldn't afford to continue. Then Linda got diagnosed. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The lawsuit died the same week we got the results. Linda couldn't fight anymore. She had a different battle now. 14 months. That's how long it took. 14 months of hospital rooms and morphine drips, and watching the woman I'd loved for 42 years waste away to nothing. The medical bills took 40 years of savings in 14 months. 40 years of careful planning. 40 years of doing everything right. Gone. Marcus came to visit once, near the end. He sat at Linda's bedside and talked about options for Danny's care. Facilities that could help. He said the words with his practiced smile, his calculating eyes. Linda was too weak to throw him out. I wasn't. After that, he approached me differently. Concerned. Helpful. He knew a friend in banking who could help us refinance the house. Better terms. Lower payments. Help with the medical bills. Linda slept in the next room, drugged and dying. I signed where Marcus pointed. I didn't read the fine print. I trusted family. Linda died on Thursday, March 14th, 8 months ago now. I held her hand while she went. Her last words were about Danny. Take care of our boy. Promise me. I promised. 6 months later, I lost the house. The loan Marcus arranged had terms I never understood. Balloon payments, variable rates, clauses that guaranteed default. His company held first right of purchase at foreclosure. Legal. All perfectly legal. I packed what I could fit in the truck. Danny's things. My tools. Linda's locket with our wedding photo. The wooden box with my grandfather's plumb bob, and the Stanley plane and the folding ruler where I'd carved her initials on our first anniversary. The new owners tore out Linda's roses the week they moved in. I drove past once and saw the yellow petals scattered on the sidewalk like confetti after a parade nobody wanted. Danny shifted beside me in the truck cab. The heater rattled against the November cold. Outside, frost climbed the windshield in patterns that looked like broken glass. "Mama," Danny said in his sleep. "Where's Mama?" he asked every night. Sometimes twice. I never knew what to tell him. I put the plumb bob back in the wooden box, closed the lid, set it on the dashboard where Linda's locket hung from the rearview mirror. 3 generations of honest work. 40 years of clean crews and straight deals. A house built with my own hands. A daughter who chose money over blood. A son who would never be whole again. A wife buried in Oakwood Cemetery. And now a woman in a tailored coat telling me about 8 commercial buildings and a dying man who remembered a wallet. Emma's drawings rustled in the glove compartment. Stick figures holding hands. Grandpa and Uncle Danny. A house with smoke from the chimney. "When are you coming back?" She'd asked the night Marcus threw us out. I still didn't have an answer. I ran my hand over my beard, trimmed it yesterday at a truck stop bathroom. Combed my hair this morning with the pocket comb Linda gave me for our 20th anniversary. My joints ached from sleeping in the cab. My hands were calloused from decades of work, the knuckles swollen now. She'd want me to keep my standards, even now. Especially now. Danny's breathing slowed. His hand relaxed on the blanket. The bad dreams were passing. I had nothing left except my integrity and my son. Theodore Vance thought that was worth $32,000 a month. We'd see. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. October, 18 months before we lost the house. Linda's voice was steady, too steady, the kind of calm that meant she was gripping the phone hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "The doctor wants to see us tomorrow." He used the word urgent. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The oncologist delivered the diagnosis in a beige office that smelled of disinfectant and carpet cleaner. Linda held my hand while he talked about treatment options and survival statistics. I watched his mouth move, but the words came through water. 3 days later, Marcus called. "Dad, Jenna, and I have been talking." He used that voice. The one that sounded like concern but meant calculation. "You and Danny should move in with us. Help with Mom's care." It makes sense, right? Families sticking together. Families sticking together. I should have heard the trap closing. Should have noticed how fast he made the offer. How ready he seemed. But Linda was dying, and Danny needed stability, and I was 65 years old, watching my world collapse. We moved into the Brennan house 3 weeks later. The first dinner set the pattern. Marcus sat at the head of the table, a position I'd never taken in 40 years of my own marriage. Jenna served the food. Emma, my granddaughter, 6 years old then, chattered about her day at school. Danny sat beside me, focused on his plate, cutting his chicken into small pieces the way his occupational therapist taught him. I mentioned a project I'd seen in the news. A downtown development, mixed use, the kind of thing I'd worked on a dozen times. They're going to have foundation problems. That soil composition won't support that weight without deeper pilings. Marcus didn't look up from his phone. Dad's confused again. The table went quiet. I'm not confused. I worked that block in '87. The ground underneath is mostly fill from the old rail yard. You can't build 60 stories on fill without reinforced caissons. Marcus smiled at Jenna. The kind of smile people exchange over children who say something foolish. "Sure, Dad." He patted my hand. "I'm sure you know better than the engineering firm." Jenna didn't say anything. She looked at her plate and moved food around with her fork. Her silence felt like agreement. That phrase became Marcus's favorite tool. Dad's confused again. He used it when I remembered something inconvenient. When I asked questions he didn't want to answer. When I existed in a way that reminded him I used to matter. Linda deteriorated through November. The chemotherapy left her thin and gray, too weak to fight, too weak to notice what was happening to her husband. In December, Marcus came to me with papers. Just a small loan, cash flow issue with the business. "You understand how these things work. 20,000 should cover it." I had savings then. Not much after the medical bills, but enough to help family. I wrote him a check for 15,000. It was what I could spare. "You'll get it back, Curt. Family helps family." 3 months later, he asked for 8,000 more. Emma's school tuition. She's been accepted at St. Catherine's. Private school. Great opportunities. I looked at my granddaughter drawing pictures at the kitchen table. Stick figures holding hands. Grandpa and Uncle Danny. I wrote the check. That spring, another request. $25,000 this time. A bid that went wrong. Suppliers backing out. I need to cover it or lose everything I've built. I didn't have $25,000 left. I told him so. His face changed. The mask slipped for half a second. Something cold behind his eyes, assessing, recalculating. Then the smile came back, bigger than before. I understand, Dad. Money's tight. But I've been thinking. That house of yours, just sitting there empty. The bills adding up. There's a guy I know at First Milwaukee who could help you refinance. Better terms, lower payments. Free up some cash for Mom's treatment. Linda was asleep in the next room. The morphine kept her comfortable, but distant. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in 6 months. My hands shook when I held a coffee cup. Marcus put the papers in front of me at the hospital. Refinancing documents. Pages of fine print that blurred when I tried to read them. Sign here and here. Initial this page. I signed where he pointed. I trusted family. Linda died on a Thursday in March. She stopped breathing at 4,117 in the afternoon, while I held her hand. Her last words were about Danny. Take care of our boy. Promise me. I promised. The funeral was on Monday. Marcus gave a speech about what a wonderful woman she'd been. Jenna cried. Emma didn't understand why everyone was so sad. By Wednesday, I was in the garage. It's just temporary, Jenna said, not meeting my eyes. We're having the guest room painted. You understand. The garage had a concrete floor, no insulation, and a space heater that worked when it felt like it. My bed was a folding cot with a thin mattress that did nothing against the cold. Frost formed on the metal workbench by morning. I could see my breath when I woke. Danny's room was in the basement, unfinished. A mattress on the floor, a bare bulb overhead, and the sound of furnace machinery through the walls. April in Wisconsin. Temperatures in the 30s at night. I slept in my clothes with 3 blankets and still woke shivering. My hands were too stiff to grip a coffee cup until I'd been awake an hour. When I mentioned the cold to Jenna, she sighed. We're doing our best, Dad. Do you know what heating costs these days? The heating bill that month was $400. I know because I saw the invoice on the counter. The main house stayed at 72 degrees. The garage got whatever warmth leaked through the door. Meals changed too. That first month, I ate with the family. By May, I ate in the kitchen after they finished. By June, I ate whatever was left. Cold pasta, half-eaten sandwiches, vegetables that had been passed over. Danny got the same treatment. He doesn't know the difference, Marcus said once, when I asked why Danny's portions kept getting smaller. It's not like he appreciates food anymore. My son appreciated food. He just couldn't say so, in a way Marcus cared to hear. The brochures started appearing in July. Sunrise Memory Care. Golden Years Assisted Living. Peaceful Pines Retirement Community. Marcus left them on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, on the seat of my truck. He never said anything directly, just let them accumulate like dust. One evening I heard him talking to Jenna in the living room. They thought I was asleep in the garage. The memory care place in Brookfield has openings. His voice carried through the thin walls. $2,300 a month. We could sell the house to cover the first few years. My house. The house I built with my own hands. The house Linda planted roses around. The house that held 40 years of my life. What about Danny? Jenna asked. There's a place in Waukesha. Group home. They'd take his disability checks as payment. And if Dad won't agree? A pause. Then Marcus. He's getting worse. He can't remember anything. We document the decline. Get a doctor to sign off on cognitive impairment. Conservatorship takes care of the rest. I lay on my cot in the garage and listen to my daughter help her husband plan my disappearance. After that, I started paying attention. I noticed when Marcus talked on the phone about contracts, about bids, about money that should have been mine. I noticed when Jenna signed checks from accounts I'd never heard of. I noticed when they whispered and stopped when I entered the room. I noticed everything. But I said nothing, because Danny needed a roof, and Emma still loved me, and I had nowhere else to go. The Thanksgiving dinner happened in November, 1 year after Linda's diagnosis, 8 months after her death. Relatives filled the dining room. Jenna's aunts and uncles. Marcus's parents. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. They made small talk about football and real estate prices, while I sat at the corner of the table and watched. Marcus held court at the head. His father had been dead 2 years, and he'd stepped into the patriarch role like he'd been born for it. Which he hadn't. His father had been a decent man who built things with his hands. Marcus was something else entirely. Someone mentioned a date. A business deal Marcus had closed. Something about a property acquisition. That was October, I said. The 12th. Marcus shook his head. No, Dad. That was September. I'm sure it was October. I remember because Linda had just started her second round of chemo. The table went quiet. Marcus's smile turned into something else. Dad's basically senile now, Marcus said to the room. He gets confused about everything. Can't remember what he had for breakfast, half the time. The relatives nodded. Some of them looked at me with pity. Others looked away, uncomfortable. The date was October 12th. I remembered because I'd written it in my notebook that morning. The same notebook I'd kept for 40 years of job sites and appointments. The notebook Marcus had taken from my room a month earlier, claiming he needed it to help sort out some paperwork. I said nothing. What could I say? A room full of people had just been told I was losing my mind. Any protest would prove the point. So I sat at the corner of the table and watched my daughter's husband erase me from my own family. The incident with Danny happened in December. We were eating dinner. Emma, Jenna, Marcus, Danny, and me. A normal evening. Chicken and rice. Danny sat across from Emma, focused on his food the way he always was. His motor control had never fully recovered from the accident. Sometimes his hands didn't do what his brain told them to do. He reached for his water glass. His fingers closed around it, but the grip wasn't right. The glass tipped. Water spread across the table, soaking Emma's placemat. Emma yelped. Not hurt, just surprised. Marcus's hand was on Danny's arm before I registered the movement. His fingers pressed into the soft flesh above the elbow, hard enough to leave marks. For God's sake. Marcus's voice was sharp with disgust. Can't you do anything right? Danny made a sound, not words. Just a whimper of confusion and pain. His eyes went wide, the way a child's eyes do when the world stops making sense. Emma started crying. I got to my feet. My knees protested. The chair scraped against the floor. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. Marcus still had Danny's arm. His fingers pressed deep. Take your hand off my son. My voice came out low, quiet. The same voice I'd used on job sites when a worker was about to do something dangerous. The voice that said, listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. Marcus looked at me. For a moment, something like fear flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone. He released Danny's arm, but didn't step back. Not my problem that he can't function like a normal person. Marcus straightened his cuffs, adjusting his expensive watch. He shouldn't even be at the table. Jenna said nothing. She stared at her plate, her face carefully blank. Emma had stopped crying. She'd slipped out of her chair and was standing behind me now, her small hand gripping the back of my shirt. I looked at Danny. His arm was red where Marcus had grabbed him. By morning, there would be a bruise. Another mark on my son's body, put there by the man who'd crippled him 10 years ago. I sat back down, not because I was giving up, not because I accepted what had happened, because Emma was behind me and Danny was across the table And if I did what I wanted to do to Marcus Brennan in that moment, I would lose access to both of them forever. That night, I went down to the basement. Danny's room was cold. The furnace rumbled through the wall, but the heat went upstairs, not down here. He was sitting on his mattress, knees pulled to his chest, crying without sound. I sat down beside him. The mattress was thin, and I could feel the concrete through it. "Danny, hey, look at me." He looked. His eyes were red. The left one still drooped slightly from the nerve damage, the way it had since the accident. "Where's Mama? When is Mama coming back?" 10 years since the accident. 8 months since Linda died. And still he asked. Every night, sometimes twice. "Mama's not coming back, buddy." I said it gently. "She's gone, but I miss her. I know." I pulled him close. His body was warm against the basement cold. "I miss her too." We sat like that for a long time. I held my son and listened to the furnace and thought about what I'd heard Marcus say about conservatorship, about selling my house, about putting Danny in a group home in Waukesha. I thought about the brochures scattered through the house like breadcrumbs, about the papers I'd signed at the hospital, about the $23,000 I'd given Marcus that I would never see again. I thought about the bruise forming on Danny's arm, and I made a decision. I would endure. I would watch. I would listen. I would remember everything. Marcus thought I was confused. He thought I couldn't remember what I had for breakfast. He was wrong. I remembered every insult, every stolen dollar, every cold night in that garage, every time my daughter looked away when her husband called me senile. I remembered it all. Somewhere, I knew there had to be a weakness. A crack in the foundation Marcus had built his life on. Something that would bring it all down. I just had to find it. Danny's breathing slowed. He was falling asleep against my shoulder. I held my son in that cold basement and waited. What I didn't know yet was that Linda had already given me the weapon I needed. Hidden in a safe deposit box I didn't know existed, waiting for me to find it. But that discovery was still months away. For now, I held Danny and listened to the furnace and waited. 3 weeks before, I found myself at that Highway 41 rest stop. Marcus called. "Family meeting. Tomorrow at 2. My office. We need to discuss Danny's care plan." His voice had that tone. The one that sounded like concern but meant calculation. I'd been hearing it for 18 months. I knew what it meant. Nothing good. I didn't sleep that night. Lay on my cot in the garage, listening to the space heater rattle against the November cold, thinking about what care plan meant in Marcus's vocabulary. The next afternoon, I drove to Brennan Construction Headquarters, a modern glass and steel building in a suburban Milwaukee business park. Marcus had built it 5 years ago, using contracts. My reputation helped him win. Using connections my name had opened. I parked my truck between a BMW and a Mercedes. Both belonged to Marcus and Jenna. My F-150 looked like something the maintenance crew had abandoned. The lobby had marble floors and a reception desk staffed by a young woman who didn't recognize me. Why would she? I was just an old man in worn clothes who happened to share a last name with the boss's wife. "Mr. Lindgren." She smiled without warmth. "Conference room B, 3rd floor." I took the elevator. My knees would have protested the stairs. Conference room B. I'd been in this room before, years ago, when Marcus first started landing major contracts. Back then, he'd asked my advice about bidding strategies and crew management. Back then, he'd listened. The mahogany table gleamed under fluorescent lights. Leather chairs surrounded it, the kind that cost more than my monthly disability check used to be. Photos of completed projects lined the walls. Office buildings, shopping centers, warehouses. I noticed one gap. A spot where a frame had hung, now removed, the wall slightly discolored where it used to be. The warehouse, The one where Danny fell. Marcus had taken it down. 4 people sat waiting. Marcus at the head of the table, of course. Jenna beside him, her eyes fixed on the wood grain. A man I didn't recognize in a gray suit, legal pad in front of him. A woman with a notary stamp and seal. 3 stacks of papers waited on the mahogany. They prepared this before I walked in. The trap was set. Curt. Marcus gestured to a chair at the far end of the table. Sit down. We have a lot to discuss. I sat. The leather creaked under my weight. The man in the gray suit leaned forward. Mr. Lindgren, I'm Walter Henderson. I represent your son-in-law in various legal matters. I nodded, but said nothing. We're here today to discuss arrangements for your welfare and your son Daniel's welfare. Henderson's voice was smooth, practiced. Given recent concerns about your cognitive state, we believe it's in everyone's best interest to establish a formal care structure. Concerns about my cognitive state. I looked at Jenna. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her fingers twisted a napkin in her lap, shredding it into strips. Henderson slid the first stack of papers across the table. This is a petition for conservatorship. It would establish Marcus and Jenna as your legal guardians, giving them authority to make decisions on your behalf regarding finances, medical care, and living arrangements. I didn't touch the papers. The second document. Henderson pushed another stack toward me. Power of attorney, specifically regarding Daniel Lindgren's Social Security disability benefits. As his father and current caregiver, you receive $1,800 monthly on his behalf. This would transfer management of those funds to Marcus and Jenna, ensuring they're used appropriately for Daniel's care. $1,800 a month. Danny's money. The money that was supposed to help him live with some dignity. I said nothing. We've identified a facility that would be perfect for Daniel. Henderson pulled out a glossy brochure. Sunrise Care Center in Waukesha. They specialize in patients with traumatic brain injuries. I'd researched that facility 2 months ago, when the first brochures started appearing around the house. 3 elder abuse complaints in 5 years. 2 staff members fired for neglect. A resident who died from a fall that took 6 hours to discover. I looked at the brochure, looked at Marcus, looked at my daughter. It's for the best, Dad. Jenna's voice was thin, strained. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. You can't take care of him anymore. And Danny needs professional help. Professional help. At a place where patients got lost and nobody noticed. I spoke for the first time. I'm not signing anything. The room went quiet. Henderson's pen stopped moving. The notary looked up from her seal. Marcus's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind his eyes. The calculation became visible. I don't think you understand the situation, Curt. His voice dropped the practiced warmth. Let me be frank. You have nothing. The house is gone. Your savings are gone. You're living in my garage, eating food my wife cooks. If you don't sign these papers, I'll have you removed from the property tonight. Both of you. I looked at him, at the expensive watch on his wrist, at the tailored shirt, at the soft hands that had never known a callus. We're trying to help, Dad, Jenna added, finally meeting my eyes for half a second before looking away again. Why do you always have to make things difficult? Why do I always have to make things difficult? My daughter, the girl who used to bring me lemonade when I built her treehouse, the woman I'd paid $120,000 to educate, the person who'd watched her husband humiliate me for 18 months and said nothing. I stayed silent, let the quiet stretch. Marcus shifted in his chair. The silence was bothering him. He was used to people talking, explaining, defending themselves, used to having ammunition to twist. I gave him nothing. Henderson cleared his throat. Mr. Lindgren, I understand this is difficult, but surely you can see that these arrangements are in everyone's best interest. Your daughter and son-in-law are willing to take on significant responsibility for your care and Daniel's care. All they're asking is the legal authority to do so properly. Significant responsibility. Like the responsibility Marcus took for the scaffold that crippled my son. I said nothing. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His expression changed. The practiced concern fell away, replaced by something colder. Something honest? You know what your problem is, Curt? He crossed his arms. You never understood leverage. You worked your whole life for what? A house? A pension? I'll make more in a quarter than you made in a decade. That's the difference between us. I play to win. I looked at him. At this man who'd married my daughter and destroyed my son. Who'd taken my money and my home and my dignity. Who sat in a leather chair in a building paid for with contracts my name had won. He thought he was winning. He thought this was over. Besides, Marcus's voice dropped lower, quieter. It's not like Danny remembers who you are half the time anyway. What difference does it make who signs the checks? Something changed in me. Not anger. Something colder. The same feeling I got checking a foundation and finding cracks. I thought about Linda dying while these people schemed over her hospital bed. I thought about Danny in his basement room, asking for Mama. I thought about 40 years building a reputation on honest work, and this man who couldn't hammer a nail straight sitting in judgment of me. I thought about the bruise on Danny's arm where Marcus had grabbed him. I thought about the space on the wall where the warehouse photo used to hang. Marcus was still talking. Something about reasonable people and practical solutions and best outcomes for everyone. His voice had taken on a condescending tone, the way you'd explain something to a child who wasn't quite bright enough to understand. I stood. The chair scraped against the floor. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. I looked at my daughter. She was staring at the table, her napkin shredded into a pile of white strips. I looked at Henderson, pen frozen over his legal pad. I looked at Marcus, at his pale blue eyes, still calculating even now. Still measuring angles and leverage and profit margins. I'm not signing anything. My voice came out level. Quiet. The same voice I'd used for 40 years on job sites. The voice that said, I've made my decision, and there's nothing more to discuss. I walked out of conference room B. Behind me, Marcus was saying something. Curt, get back here. You can't just... I didn't hear the rest. The door closed behind me. The elevator ride down took forever. My reflection in the polished metal doors looked old, tired. My father had looked like this at the end. But something in my eyes was different. Something that hadn't been there an hour ago. I drove back to Marcus's house. My truck rattled through the suburb, past the neat lawns and trimmed hedges, past the lives that made sense. When I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was wrong. Boxes sat beside the garage door. My boxes. Clothes, blankets, the few possessions I'd managed to keep. Packed and stacked on the concrete like trash waiting for pickup. A note was taped to the top box. Jenna's handwriting, neat and careful. Dad, we think it's best for everyone if you find somewhere else to stay. There's $200 in the envelope to help you get started. We'll keep Danny's things until you find a suitable place for him. J, $200. I picked up the envelope, counted the bills. 10 20s, crisp from the bank. $200 for 40 years of sacrifice. For paying her college tuition. For giving Marcus his startup capital. For co-signing their house loan. For 18 months in a frozen garage. $200. I loaded the boxes into my truck. The bed was almost empty. Everything I owned fit with room to spare. Then I went to get Danny. He was in his basement room, sitting on the mattress, looking at a picture book Linda had bought him years ago. He looked up when I came down the stairs. Dad? Are we going somewhere? Yeah, buddy. we're going somewhere. Where? I don't know yet. Somewhere better. He smiled. That simple, trusting smile that broke my heart every time I saw it. Okay? Can I bring my book? You can bring whatever you want. I helped him pack his things. Clothes. The book. A stuffed bear Linda had given him for his 30th birthday. The one he'd slept with ever since. We were carrying his bags through the kitchen when the front door opened. Emma ran in from school. Her backpack bounced on her shoulders. Her face lit up when she saw us. Grandpa, Uncle Danny. Then she saw the bags. She stopped smiling. What's happening? Where are you going? I set down the bags and knelt so I was at her eye level. My knees protested. Your mom and dad think it's best if Uncle Danny and I stay somewhere else for a while. But why? Her lower lip trembled. I don't want you to go. I know, sweetheart, I know. She threw her arms around my neck. Her small body shook with tears. She smelled like crayons and playground dust. When are you coming back? I couldn't answer. I held her and felt her crying against my shoulder, and I couldn't say the words that would make it better. She pulled back and reached into her pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, folded twice. I made this for you. At school today, I unfolded it. Crayon on construction paper. 3 stick figures holding hands. Grandpa and Uncle Danny and me. Above them, a house with smoke coming from the chimney and a yellow sun in the corner. Underneath, in careful 8-year-old letters, when you come home. I folded the paper and put it in my shirt pocket, over my heart. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too, Grandpa. She hugged me one more time. Then I stood, took Danny's hand, and walked out the door. We drove. I didn't know where we were going. Just away. Away from that house and those people and everything they'd taken from me. The sun was setting when I saw the sign for Highway 41. I took the exit without thinking. An hour later, I pulled into a rest stop. The parking lot was mostly empty. A few trucks idled in the designated spaces. A couple of cars passed through, heading somewhere with purpose. I parked away from the main building, near a stand of pine trees that blocked the wind. Danny was already half asleep in the passenger seat. I helped him stretch out on the bench seat, covered him with the blanket from one of the boxes. Are we camping, Dad? Yeah, buddy, we're camping. He smiled, his eyes closing. Like when I was little. You and Mom used to take me camping. That's right, just like that. His breathing slowed. The bad dreams would come later, like they always did. But for now, he was peaceful. I sat in the driver's seat and watched the November darkness settle over the rest stop. Linda's locket hung from the rearview mirror. I touched it, felt the smooth gold under my fingers. The temperature was dropping into the 20s. The truck's heater clicked and rattled, fighting against the cold. I had $200. A truck with 287,000 miles. A brain-injured son sleeping beside me. And nothing else. Except my integrity. Marcus thought he'd won. Thought leverage was everything. Thought money and lawyers and legal documents could strip away 40 years of honest work. He was wrong. I made a promise in that cold truck, to Linda's memory, to the man I'd spent my whole life becoming. I would protect Danny, whatever it took, and I would make them answer for what they'd done. I wasn't living in his garage anymore. Wasn't eating his food. Wasn't under his roof, subject to his rules, vulnerable to his schemes. I was free. Cold and hungry and homeless, but free. Danny shifted in his sleep, his hand finding the edge of the blanket. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear, probably asking for his mother. I pulled my jacket tighter and settled back in the driver's seat. The night was long and cold and dark. I waited. Rachel Okonkwo stayed at that rest stop for 2 hours. She sat in my truck while Danny slept. explaining everything in a voice that belonged in boardrooms, not freezing parking lots at 3 in the morning. The heater rattled. Frost crept up the windshield, and I listened to a story that didn't make sense. Theodore Vance had been looking for me since 1983. 43 years. He'd hired investigators, private detectives, people whose job was finding people who didn't want to be found. Except, I wasn't hiding. I was a foreman in Milwaukee, building houses and raising kids and living a life that didn't attract attention. He found you 2 years ago. Rachel's breath fogged in the cold air. His investigators located you through old union records, cross-referenced with your Social Security contributions. You were living in Wauwatosa, married, retired. Your son Daniel was receiving disability benefits after a workplace injury. I waited. Mr. Vance instructed me to monitor your situation. She pulled her coat tighter. He said he wanted to help, but only when you needed it. He said, a man with your integrity wouldn't accept charity. He said you'd need to be desperate first. Desperate. I looked at Danny sleeping on the bench seat, at the boxes of my belongings stacked in the truck bed, at Linda's locket hanging from the rearview mirror. I'd say I qualify. Rachel nodded. When Mr. Vance's health declined 3 weeks ago, I began more active surveillance. I tracked your daughter's financial activity. I monitored the foreclosure proceedings. When I learned you'd been evicted yesterday, I started checking rest stops along the major highways. She'd been looking for me, driving up and down Highway 41 in the middle of the night, searching for a rusted F-150 with an old man inside. Why? I asked. Because Mr. Vance made me promise. Her voice softened. He's dying, Mr. Lindgren. Congestive heart failure. He has weeks left, maybe days. And his final wish was to repay a debt he's carried for 43 years. A debt for returning a wallet. That $4,000 closed a deal that became the foundation of his empire. Rachel's eyes met mine. He's told the story 100 times. The young foreman who tracked him down, handed back the money, and refused a reward. He said no one had ever done that. Not once in his entire career. I remembered Vance's face in that hotel doorway. The confusion. The disbelief. His jaw loosened. He set down the phone. It wasn't mine, I'd said. I know. Rachel reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder, and Mr. Vance never forgot. The folder contained legal documents, pages of fine print that blurred when I tried to read them in the dim cab light. Rachel summarized. 8 commercial properties in Milwaukee, East Side and 3rd Ward. Retail spaces, office buildings, a converted warehouse with artisan tenants, professional management already in place. Total monthly rental income, $32,000. I stopped breathing. The portfolio is valued at approximately $4.5 million. Rachel's voice stayed level. Numbers, facts. No drama. It's structured through an irrevocable trust. That means it cannot be contested, altered, or accessed by any third party, including your daughter and son-in-law. $4.5 million. I ran my finger down the column of figures she pointed to. 4.5 million. The number sat there, impossible. I'd worked my whole life for what? Pension. A house I'd built with my own hands. 40 years of clean crews and straight deals. And now a man I'd met once for 5 minutes was giving me more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. There's more. Rachel pulled out another document. A special needs trust for Daniel. It supplements his care without affecting his disability benefits. Professional caregivers. Medical treatment. Whatever he needs for the rest of his life. Danny shifted in his sleep. His hand found the edge of the blanket. Something cracked inside my chest. My hands stopped shaking for the first time in 3 weeks. Why would he do this? Rachel set down her pen. My parents came from Nigeria in 1978. They worked factory jobs, 12-hour shifts, minimum wage, no benefits. My father saved every penny for 20 years so I could go to law school. She looked at me. I know what it means to be underestimated. I know what it means when someone with nothing gives everything they have to help someone else. She closed the folder. Mr. Vance told me to find a man who would give back $4,000 he could have kept. He said that man deserved everything I could give him. Those were his exact words. I sat in that cold truck and tried to understand what was happening. 3 weeks ago, I'd been sleeping in Marcus's garage, eating whatever scraps they left me. Now, a dying billionaire was handing me financial security for the rest of my life. Because I returned a wallet in 1983. There's one more thing. Rachel reached for her briefcase again. Something the original investigators mentioned that we never followed up on. What? Your late wife. Did she have a safe deposit box? The question caught me off guard. Linda? No, she never mentioned one. The investigators found a reference to one in her bank records. First National Bank, Wauwatosa. The annual fee was being paid from a savings account. An account your son-in-law never knew about. I thought about Linda. About the way she'd fought for Danny through 5 years of legal battles. About her school teacher's instinct for documentation, for keeping records, for making sure nothing important got lost. Where would the key be? Rachel shrugged. Her personal effects, perhaps. Jewelry, clothing. My eyes went to the rearview mirror. To Linda's locket, gold and worn, hanging where it had hung since the day I lost the house. I reached up and unhooked it. The chain was cold in my palm. I'd looked at this locket 1,000 times since Linda died. Had held it when I couldn't sleep. Had talked to her photograph like she could still hear me. I'd never thought to open it. The latch was small, almost invisible. My fingers were clumsy from the cold. But it gave. Behind the wedding photo, wedged into the back of the case, was a small brass key. Worn smooth on one edge from being handled. She'd checked it often. Rachel leaned forward. Is that it? I held the key up to the weak cab light. First National Bank was stamped into the metal. Linda had left me something. Hidden it where only I would find it. Kept it secret through 5 years of legal battles and 14 months of dying. What did she leave me? There was only one way to find out. The bank opened at 9. Rachel booked us a hotel for what remained of the night. 2 rooms, modest but warm, with real beds and a shower that produced hot water. The sheets smelled like detergent. I'd forgotten what clean sheets smelled like. Danny slept for 6 hours straight. The first real sleep either of us had gotten in 3 weeks. When he woke, he looked around the hotel room with wonder. Where are we, Dad? Somewhere safe, buddy. Somewhere better. He smiled and pulled the blankets tighter, content. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the sun come up over the parking lot. Linda's locket lay in my palm, the key still warm from my hand. At 8:45, Rachel knocked on my door. Her firm had called ahead. The bank was expecting us. First National Bank, Wauwatosa, the same branch where Linda and I had opened our first joint account in 1979. The same building where we'd signed the mortgage for our house. The same lobby where Marcus had arranged the refinancing that stole everything. A manager met us at the door. She led us through the lobby, past the teller windows, down a hallway I'd never noticed before. At the end of the hall was a heavy steel door. Behind the door was the vault. Box number 18847. The manager pulled it from the wall and set it on a table in a small private room. She left us alone. I stood there, looking at a metal box the size of a shoebox, afraid to open it. Mr. Lindgren. Rachel set down her pen. Take your time. I inserted the key. The lock clicked. The lid opened. Inside was a manila envelope thick with papers. A smaller envelope marked with my name in Linda's handwriting. And 3 photographs. I picked up the photographs first. They showed a construction site, a warehouse, scaffolding against one wall. In the first photo, the scaffolding looked normal. In the second, taken from a different angle, I could see something wrong. A support beam that didn't connect properly. A brace that was bent. In the third photo, a man in a hard hat stood next to the defective scaffolding, pointing at the bent brace. I recognized him. Eddie Kowalski. He'd worked under me for 6 years before taking a job with Brennan Construction. Eddie had taken these photos. Eddie had documented the evidence. Eddie had been fired 2 weeks after Danny's accident. Nobody knew why. Now I knew. I opened the manila envelope. Inside were papers, official papers. OSH, a letterhead. Safety complaints, filed after Danny's accident. Detailing defective materials, skipped inspections, a pattern of violations going back 3 years. The complaints had been buried in legal motions, classified, sealed. Marcus's lawyers had made them disappear. But Linda had copies. Page after page. Inspection reports. Witness statements. A typed timeline with dates and names and dollar amounts showing exactly how much money Marcus had saved by cutting corners on safety equipment. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of lined paper. Linda's handwriting. Careful and precise, the way she'd graded papers for 30 years. My darling Curt, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about this box. I was afraid Marcus would find out. I was afraid he'd destroy the evidence before I could use it. His lawyers buried everything. They made the complaints disappear. They silenced the witnesses. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. I spent 2 years gathering these documents. Eddie risked his job to take those photographs. Other workers gave statements. Everything is here. Everything they tried to hide. Make them pay for what they did to Danny. Don't let them win. You're the strongest man I've ever known. The most honest. The most patient. You've endured so much for our family. Now it's time to stop enduring. It's time to fight. I'll be watching. I'll be proud. Love always, Linda. I wiped my eyes. The letter shook in my hands. Linda, still protecting our family. Still fighting, even after death. Mr. Lindgren, Rachel's voice came from far away. Are you all right? I set the letter down, looked at the evidence spread across the table. 22 feet. Danny fell 22 feet because Marcus Brennan wanted to save money on scaffold braces. And Linda had spent 2 years of her dying life making sure the proof survived. I'm fine, I said. What do we do with this? We build a case. Rachel's firm worked fast. Patricia Volkov, forensic accountant recommended by Rachel's firm, arrived the next day. A small woman with sharp eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her laptop held spreadsheets that could trace a penny through a maze. She traced the predatory loan scheme in 4 hours. Found the diverted disability payments in 6. $43,000. That's how much Marcus and Jenna had stolen. From me. From Danny. From the system designed to help injured workers, Patricia documented everything. Account numbers. Transaction dates. Forged signatures. A paper trail that led straight to Brennan Construction's operating accounts. The money went in, she said, pointing at her screen. But it never went out. Not for Danny's care. Not for medical expenses. It accumulated interest, while your son slept on a mattress in an unfinished basement. A retired OSHA investigator named Frank Morrison, a contact from my union days, reviewed Linda's preserved complaints. He spent 3 days going through the documents, taking notes, cross-referencing dates. The stack of papers grew as he worked. annotated with his careful handwriting. "This is solid," he said when he finished. "Criminal negligence, clear as day. Defective materials. Skipped inspections. A pattern of violations. If these complaints had been properly investigated, Danny Lindgren's accident never would have happened." He set down his pen. "Whoever preserved these documents knew exactly what they were doing. They kept the chain of custody intact, copied everything in order, made notes about where each document came from." He looked at me. "Your wife was a teacher?" "Second grade, 30 years. Frank nodded. "She would have made a hell of an investigator." Over the following week, I made 17 phone calls. Each one opened a door. Men I'd worked with for decades. Foremen who'd risen through the ranks like I had. Laborers who'd become inspectors, union stewards, safety supervisors. The old network. The men who remembered. Curt Lindgren. "I haven't heard that name in years." "How the hell are you?" I told them about Danny, about Linda, about Marcus and the scaffold and the buried complaints. The response was immediate. "I'll testify. Brennan's crews still cut corners. I've got documentation. Count me in. My nephew worked for them last year. Walked off after a week. Said the safety conditions were criminal. Whatever you need, Curt. Name the time. 40 years of honest work. 40 years of running clean crews, keeping my word, protecting the men under me. That kind of trust couldn't be bought. Couldn't be stolen. Couldn't be taken away in a conference room with a stack of legal papers." Marcus thought leverage was about money, about lawyers, about power. He was wrong. Leverage was about trust, about relationships built over 40 years of honest work, about men who remembered a foreman, who protected his crews, who never cut corners, who kept his word. On the 6th day, I sat in Rachel's office. The case files were stacked on her desk. Complaints, financial records, witness statements, everything we needed. "One question," I said. Rachel waited. "Can we do this without hurting Emma?" She was quiet for a long time. Her fingers tapped against the desk. Her eyes went to the window, then back to me. "We can try," she said finally. "But your granddaughter will learn the truth eventually. About her father. About what he did. Better she hears it from you than from the evening news." I thought about Emma. Her crayon drawings. Her arms around my neck. "When are you coming back?" She was 8 years old. She deserved a childhood, without courtrooms and criminal charges, and the knowledge that her father had crippled her uncle. But she also deserved the truth. "All right," I said. "Let's arrange a meeting." Rachel nodded. "Conference room B?" Conference room B, the same room where Marcus had tried to destroy me 3 weeks ago. The same mahogany table. The same leather chairs. This time, I'd be the one with the folder. Emma's birthday card sat on my kitchen table for 2 hours before I wrote the message. The card had a puppy on the front. She loved puppies. I'd found it at a gas station 3 days ago, tucked between motor oil displays and phone chargers. The cashier gave me a strange look when I asked for an envelope. I picked up the pen Rachel had given me. Hotel stationery. Clean, white, expensive. "Tell your mom and dad that Grandpa wants to talk. Brennan Construction Headquarters. Saturday at 2 p.m. I have something that belongs to them." I signed it, sealed it, and mailed it that afternoon. Marcus would assume I'd broken, that 3 weeks of homelessness had finally cracked the old man's stubbornness, that I'd crawl into conference room B and sign whatever papers they put in front of me. Let him think that. Saturday morning, I showered in a hotel bathroom with hot water and clean towels. I shaved around my beard edges, trimmed the gray hairs that had grown wild during those weeks in the truck. My reflection looked different. Not younger, just restored. Rachel had taken me shopping the day before. Nothing expensive. A navy sport coat from a department store. pressed khakis, a white button-down shirt, new shoes that didn't have holes in the soles. I looked like the man I used to be, the foreman who commanded respect on job sites. The husband Linda had kissed goodbye every morning. Danny had smiled when I left him at the facility yesterday. His first real smile in months. Rachel had arranged his care at a residential facility in Brookfield, the kind of place with trained professionals and private rooms and staff who spoke to him like a person. "Don't worry, Dad. I like it here. They have puzzles." I straightened my collar in the mirror. Time to end this. The drive to Brennan Construction took 20 minutes. I parked my truck in the visitor lot between a Mercedes and a Lexus. The Burgundy F-150 looked like something maintenance had abandoned. Good. Let them underestimate me one more time. The lobby hadn't changed. Marble floors. Reception desk. The young woman who'd looked through me 3 weeks ago now glanced at my sport coat and smiled. "Mr. Lindgren, they're expecting you. Conference room B." I took the elevator. 3rd floor. The same hallway. The same door. But I wasn't the same man who'd walked out of this room with nothing. I pushed open the door. Marcus sat at the head of the mahogany table, exactly where he'd sat 3 weeks ago. Jenna beside him, her hands folded in her lap. Henderson, the lawyer, had his legal pad ready, pen uncapped. Papers waited in a neat stack. The conservatorship petition. The power of attorney. Everything they needed to strip me of my son and my dignity. "Curt." Marcus's smile showed too many teeth. "Glad you came to your senses." He gestured to the chair at the far end of the table. The same chair I'd occupied during the ambush. The supplicant's chair. "Where's Danny?" I didn't answer. I walked to the chair, sat down, and placed Linda's locket on the mahogany surface between us. The gold caught the fluorescent light. Our wedding photo visible through the glass. Marcus's smile flickered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I said nothing. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The silence stretched like a wire pulled tight. Henderson cleared his throat. Jenna's fingers twisted in her lap. Marcus shifted in his leather chair. I waited. The door opened behind me. Rachel Okonkwo entered first. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's BMW payment. Her presence changed the room. The air felt different. Behind her came Patricia Volkov, forensic accountant. Small, sharp-eyed, reading glasses perched on her nose. She carried a leather folder thick with documents. Marcus's face changed. "Who authorized this?" His voice rose half an octave. "We agreed that this was a family meeting." "You agreed to nothing." Rachel sat down beside me. "I'm here as Mr. Lindgren's attorney. Before we discuss any paperwork, there are matters to address." Henderson leaned forward. "Ms. Okonkwo, this is highly irregular. My client expected a private conversation with his father-in-law regarding care arrangements. Your client," Rachel said, "attempted to obtain conservatorship over a legally competent adult through a coordinated campaign of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation." Henderson's pen stopped moving. "Mr. Lindgren's legal capacity has been documented by 3 independent physicians this week." Rachel opened her briefcase and removed a folder. "Cognitive assessments, memory testing, psychological evaluation. All 3 concluded that Curtis Lindgren is mentally sound, legally competent, and fully capable of managing his own affairs and his son's care." She slid the folder across the table toward Henderson. "Any conservatorship petition will be denied. Additionally, the circumstances surrounding the petition may result in counterfiling for attempted elder abuse under Wisconsin Statute 940-28-5. Jenna's face went pale. "This is ridiculous." Marcus's voice had an edge now. "We were trying to help him. He couldn't take care of himself or Danny. We offered him a home." Patricia Volkov opened her leather folder. "In the past 8 months, $43,000 has been diverted from Mr. Lindgren's personal accounts and Daniel Lindgren's Social Security disability benefits. She adjusted her reading glasses. The funds were transferred to accounts controlled by Marcus and Jenna Brennan through a series of transactions beginning in April of this year. She pulled out a spreadsheet and turned it to face the room. April 7th, $8,000, described in the transfer memo as tuition assistance. No corresponding tuition payment to any educational institution was made. That was for Emma's school. Marcus's voice rose. Curt agreed to help with tuition. May 15th, $15,000, described as loan repayment. No loan documentation exists in any banking record associated with Mr. Lindgren. Those were loans. Curt agreed. July 2nd through September 30th, $18,000 in incremental transfers from Daniel Lindgren's disability account. Each transfer was made using a power of attorney form bearing Mr. Lindgren's signature. Patricia removed another page from her folder. A signature that does not match Mr. Lindgren's documented handwriting in 17 of 23 samples, analyzed by a certified forensic examiner. Silence. Henderson set down his pen. Furthermore, Patricia's voice remained level. The refinancing of the Lindgren family home was conducted under conditions that constitute financial exploitation under Wisconsin elder abuse statutes. Variable rate provisions that guaranteed default. Balloon payment clauses. First right of purchase held by Brennan Construction at foreclosure. Class F felony. Up to 12 years imprisonment and $250,000 in fines. Jenna made a sound. Not words. Just air escaping. Marcus's jaw worked. His hands gripped the armrests of his leather chair. The smile was gone. In its place was something I'd seen before. The same calculating look he'd worn in this room 3 weeks ago, searching for leverage, searching for angles. He wouldn't find any. Rachel slid a manila envelope across the mahogany table. Mr. Brennan, you should also know that preserved copies of the original OSHA safety complaints from your employee, Daniel Lindgren's workplace accident, have been located and provided to Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services investigators. The envelope sat between us. Marcus stared at it like it might bite him. The complaints document defective materials, skipped safety inspections, and a pattern of violations going back 3 years before the accident. Rachel's voice was steady. Criminal negligence charges are being evaluated. The evidence suggests that Brennan Construction knowingly used substandard scaffold equipment to reduce costs, directly causing the traumatic brain injury that has left Daniel Lindgren permanently disabled. Those files were sealed. Marcus's voice cracked. His face had gone the color of old paper. How did you? I spoke for the first time. Linda kept copies. Marcus looked at me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. She always was smarter than both of us. I picked up Linda's locket from the table. The gold was warm in my palm. Our wedding photo. Her smile. The woman who'd spent the last 2 years of her life fighting for our son, even while cancer ate her from the inside. The woman who'd hidden evidence in a safe deposit box I never knew about, who'd preserved documents that Marcus's lawyers thought were destroyed, who'd written me a letter I'd carry in my heart until I died. Make them pay for what they did to Danny. I was making them pay. This is blackmail. Marcus pushed back from the table. His chair scraped against the floor. You can't prove any of this. And even if you could, you're still broke. You're still homeless. You're still nobody. Rachel smiled. The expression didn't reach her eyes. She reached into her briefcase and removed a thick sheaf of documents bound with a blue legal cover. Mr. Lindgren is the sole beneficiary of an irrevocable trust established by Theodore Vance of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The trust contains 8 commercial properties in Milwaukee, generating $32,000 in monthly rental income. Total portfolio value is approximately $4.5 million. She set the documents on the table. The trust is structured to be bulletproof against contestation, alteration, or access by any third party, including, specifically, family members who might attempt to claim the assets through legal maneuvering. Rachel looked at Marcus. He is, in fact, significantly wealthier than you, Mr. Brennan. Marcus's face went white. The same expression he'd worn 10 years ago, standing in a hospital waiting room while doctors told us Danny might not survive the night. The same slack jaw, the same empty eyes, the same cowardice hiding behind expensive clothes. I stood. The chair didn't scrape. I rose the way a foreman rises when he's about to fire someone, the way a man rises when he has nothing left to prove. I'm not here for revenge. I kept my voice low, quiet. The voice Linda used to say could calm a room full of angry workers with 3 words. I'm here so you understand something. I looked at my daughter. Jenna sat frozen in her chair. Her hands had stopped moving. Her eyes were fixed on the table, on the documents, on the evidence of her betrayal laid out in neat stacks. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. Your mother spent her last years fighting for Danny. I kept my voice level. While you helped the man who crippled him, while you watched your husband steal from me and said nothing, while you let him put your brother in a basement room and feed him scraps. Jenna's shoulders shook. I can't forgive what you did. She finally looked up. Tears ran down her face. The same face that had beamed at me from graduation photos. The same face that had laughed when I walked her down the aisle. The face of a stranger. But I won't take your daughter. Jenna's shoulders dropped. Her hands unclenched. I turned to Marcus. He stood at the head of the table, gripping the mahogany edge like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His expensive watch caught the light. His soft hands pressed white against the wood. You said, I never understood leverage. I stepped toward him. 1 step. 2, you were right. I didn't understand how a man could use it against his own family. I picked up Linda's locket from where I'd set it down. But I understand now. And I have more leverage than you ever imagined. Marcus's mouth opened, closed. I walked past him. Behind me, voices rose. Marcus shouting at Henderson for solutions. Henderson gathering papers. Jenna crying, the sound muffled like she pressed her hands to her face. I didn't look back. The hallway outside Conference Room B was quiet. Afternoon light slanted through tall windows. Somewhere on the floor below, phones rang and keyboards clicked. Normal business. Normal day. The world kept turning while Marcus Brennan's collapsed. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard running footsteps. Grandpa. Emma came around the corner at full speed. Her backpack bounced on her shoulders. Her face was red from running. She'd snuck away from her babysitter. She threw herself against me and wrapped her arms around my waist. I knelt down. My knees protested, but I didn't care. Her small body shook against mine. Her hands gripped my jacket. Are you okay? Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. I heard Mom and Dad yelling. I heard somebody say, jail. I held her. Through the conference room glass, I could see Marcus pacing. His hands waved in the air. Henderson stood by the door, face blank. Jenna hadn't moved from her chair. Their world was ending. Mine was just beginning. I'm okay, sweetheart. I pulled back and looked at her face. Better than okay. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. When are you coming home? The question she'd asked 3 weeks ago. The night Marcus threw us out. When are you coming back? I had an answer now. I'm not coming back to that house. I said it gently. But you can come visit me. I have a new place. With a garden. Uncle Danny's there too. Really, really. She hugged me again. her arms around my neck, the smell of crayons and playground dust. Over her shoulder, I watched Marcus through the glass. He'd stopped pacing. He stood at the window, staring out at the parking lot where his BMW sat next to my rusted F-150. 2 vehicles. 2 lives. One built on lies and stolen money and other people's suffering. One built on 40 years of honest work. I knew which one I'd rather have. Emma pulled back. "I have something for you." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. Folded twice. Crayon on construction paper. I unfolded it. 4 stick figures this time. Grandpa, Uncle Danny, me, and a new one, labeled in her 8-year-old letters. Great-Grandma Linda. She was watching from a cloud in the corner of the page, smiling. Stick figure arms spread wide. "I made it at school." Emma's voice was small. "Mom said not to talk about great-grandma anymore. But I wanted to remember her." My throat tightened. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket, over my heart. Next to the other drawings, the elevator dinged behind us. I stood up. "I have to go now," I said, "but I'll see you soon." "I promise." Emma nodded. Her lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Strong, like her grandmother. I walked to the elevator. The doors opened. I stepped inside. Before they closed, I looked back at the conference room one more time. Marcus had stopped moving. He stood at the head of the mahogany table, staring at the documents Rachel had left behind. The OSHA complaints, the financial records, the trust papers. Everything he'd schemed and stolen and lied for. Gone. The elevator doors closed. I rode down alone, Linda's locket warm in my palm, Emma's drawing in my pocket. The weeks after the confrontation moved like machinery. Each day brought another document, another phone call, another crack in Marcus's foundation. Rachel called on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the confrontation in Conference Room B. The Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services has officially reopened the Daniel Lindgren workplace injury investigation. Her voice carried a satisfaction she rarely showed. They've assigned 2 senior investigators and marked it priority. I sat in my hotel room, watching Danny work on a jigsaw puzzle at the small table by the window. A picture of a lighthouse. He'd been working on it for 2 days, sorting pieces by color, humming to himself. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Linda's evidence is in the hands of people who know what to do with it." The investigators moved fast. Frank Morrison, the retired OSHA inspector who'd reviewed Linda's documents, served as their consultant. He walked them through the complaint timeline, the photographs of defective scaffold equipment, the pattern of violations stretching back years before Danny fell. Within a week, they'd interviewed 6 of my former contacts, men who'd worked with Brennan Construction over the years, men who'd seen the shortcuts, the cost-cutting, the safety inspections that never happened. The industry network spread the word before the official charges came down. By the end of the 2nd week, Brennan Construction was toxic. Subcontractors who'd worked with Marcus for a decade stopped returning calls. Suppliers began demanding cash on delivery. The criminal charges were filed on a Friday morning in late November. Marcus Brennan. Criminal negligence causing great bodily harm. Class H felony. Up to 6 years imprisonment. I heard about it from Rachel, who'd been monitoring the court filings. She read me the charges over the phone while I sat in my truck outside the care facility where Danny now lived. They're claiming defective materials and skipped inspections directly caused your son's injuries. The prosecutor cited Linda's documentation extensively. There's also a pattern of similar violations on other Brennan construction sites. Inside the facility, through the window, I could see Danny in the common room. He was showing another resident his lighthouse puzzle, pointing at the pieces he'd completed. smiling. What happens next? Arraignment next week. His lawyers will try for bail. Given the flight risk and severity of charges, I'd expect significant conditions. Marcus Brennan, the man who'd called me senile, the man who'd grabbed my son's arm hard enough to bruise, the man who'd stolen $43,000 and called it family, helping family. Now he'd stand in a courtroom and answer for what he'd done. The financial charges came 3 days later. Patricia Volkov's documentation of the predatory loan scheme and diverted disability payments gave prosecutors everything they needed. Elder abuse under Wisconsin Statute 940.285. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Marcus's assets were frozen the same day the charges were filed. Rachel explained what that meant in practical terms. He can't access his bank accounts, can't sell property, can't liquidate investments. His lawyers are working on contingency now, hoping for a settlement that might never come. Without liquid assets, Brennan Construction began hemorrhaging. Bonding companies reviewed their risk exposure and made quick decisions. Within 2 weeks, 3 of them had revoked coverage. A construction company without bonds can't bid on significant projects, can't secure the contracts that keep crews working and suppliers paid. The company Marcus had built on my reputation and other people's suffering was collapsing from the inside. 3 contracts canceled. Criminal charges. Frozen assets. Chaos. Nobody wanted their name near Brennan Construction. Employees stopped showing up when their paychecks bounced. Suppliers refused delivery without cash up front. The equipment yard emptied as leased machinery was repossessed. Marcus had wanted to put me in a nursing home. Now his own company was being wheeled out in pieces. Jenna filed for divorce on a Wednesday, 6 weeks after the confrontation. I learned about it from Rachel, who'd received a desperate phone call that morning. She wants to meet. Rachel's voice carried something between amusement and contempt. She says she has information. She says she was manipulated. What did you tell her? I told her to communicate through her attorney. But Jenna didn't have an attorney. The divorce filing was pro se, done without legal representation. All their joint assets were frozen. Whatever money she'd hidden wasn't enough to hire the kind of lawyer who could extract her from this. She tried again 3 days later. Left a message on Rachel's office voicemail. I played the recording in Rachel's conference room. Jenna's voice sounded thin, desperate. I didn't know what Marcus was doing. He controlled everything. The finances, the business, everything. I was just a wife. I was manipulated. If you could just talk to my father. Explain that I was a victim too. Rachel stopped the recording. She's positioning herself for the divorce proceedings, trying to establish that all the financial crimes were Marcus's doing, that she was an innocent bystander. I looked at the documents spread across the conference table. Patricia's spreadsheets, bank records, transfer authorizations. What do the records show? Rachel pulled out a folder. Your daughter's signature appears on 47 documents related to your financial exploitation. Power of attorney forms, account access authorizations, loan agreements, each one notarized, each one dated and witnessed. She flipped to another page. Additionally, our records show that Jenna Brennan visited her parents' home during Mrs. Lindgren's illness on exactly 2 occasions. Both visits coincided with the signing of financial documents. The first was the refinancing agreement. The second was the transfer of Daniel's disability benefit management. 2 visits. While her mother was dying of cancer, both times to get signatures on papers that would strip her father of everything he had. I didn't say anything. Rachel closed the folder. Please direct further communication through your attorney. That's what I told her. There's nothing more to discuss. The divorce proceedings exposed everything Jenna had tried to hide. Her knowledge of the financial exploitation, her participation in the scheme, her silence while her husband humiliated her father and neglected her brother. The court found her claim of manipulation unconvincing. The forensic evidence was too clear, the signatures too consistent, the timeline too precise. She'd known, she'd helped, she'd profited. The investigative journalist found me through Eddie Kowalski, the man who'd taken the photographs of the defective scaffold 10 years ago. Eddie had lost his job for trying to document the truth. Now he wanted that truth told. The reporter was named Sarah Chen, 32 years old, worked for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. She'd covered construction industry scandals before. She understood the technical details, the regulatory failures, the human cost. We met at a coffee shop on the east side. She brought a notebook and a recorder. I brought a folder of documents Rachel had cleared for public disclosure. "Mr. Lindgren," she said, "I've reviewed the OSHA complaints your wife preserved. I've spoken with former Brennan construction employees. I've seen the financial records. Can you tell me, in your own words, what happened to your son?" I told her. Not the legal summary. Not the technical details. The truth. Danny was 29 when he fell. He was a carpenter, like me. Better than me, actually. He had steadier hands. More patience. He could look at a piece of wood and see what it wanted to become. Sarah wrote in her notebook. Didn't interrupt. He was working on a warehouse project for Brennan Construction. His brother-in-law's company. His sister's husband. He trusted them. We all trusted them. I paused. Looked out the window at the street where people walked past, living their normal lives. The scaffold collapsed because Marcus Brennan wanted to save money on equipment. He knew the braces were defective. He knew the inspections had been skipped. He did it anyway. What happened after the fall? 22 feet. Head trauma. By the time I got to the hospital, they'd already taken him into surgery. And afterward, I looked at her. My son wakes up every morning and asks for his mother. She died 8 months ago, but he doesn't remember. He has the mind of a 7-year-old. He'll never work again. Never live independently. Never be the man he was supposed to become. Sarah stopped writing. We tried to sue. My wife spent 5 years fighting for justice. Marcus's lawyers buried us in motions. Sealed the evidence. Silenced the witnesses. We ran out of money. Then we ran out of time. Linda got cancer. The article ran the following Sunday. Front page, above the fold. My phone rang before I finished my coffee. A photograph of Danny before the accident, smiling in his carpenter's apron. A photograph of Marcus at a charity gala, champagne glass in hand. The headline, Construction Executive Faces Criminal Charges After Employee's Brain Injury. Victim was his brother-in-law. Sarah had done her work. The story laid out everything. The scaffold collapse. The buried lawsuit. The elder abuse. The stolen inheritance. The forged signatures. The predatory loan. She'd interviewed former Brennan construction employees who described ongoing safety violations. She'd obtained internal documents showing cost-cutting decisions that prioritized profit over worker safety. She'd traced the financial exploitation through bank records and court filings. The community learned everything. Marcus's country club membership was revoked within a week. Former business associates stopped returning his calls. The social network he'd cultivated for 15 years dissolved overnight. The man who'd called me senile at Thanksgiving dinner found himself eating alone. The trial began in January. 3 weeks in county court. Wood-paneled walls, American flags flanking the judge's bench. The smell of old wood and floor polish. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead. A gallery filled with reporters, former employees, and curious citizens who'd read Sarah's article. I sat in the front row every day. The prosecution built their case, piece by piece. Complaints, photographs, expert testimony on scaffold safety standards, former employees who described the culture of cost-cutting that pervaded Brennan Construction. Marcus's defense attorneys tried to shift blame. Site supervisors who should have caught the defects. Equipment vendors who sold faulty materials. Anyone but their client. But Linda's documents destroyed every argument. She'd kept everything. Dated. Organized. Cross-referenced. A school teacher's instinct for documentation applied to the fight for her son. On the fourth day, I testified. The prosecutor, a woman named Catherine Park, walked me through Danny's life before the accident. His work as a carpenter. His skill with tools. The treehouse we'd built together when he was 12. The workshop in my basement where I'd taught him to use a plane. Then she asked about after. I described Danny's room in Marcus's basement. The thin mattress on concrete. The bare bulb overhead. The cold that seeped through the walls. I described the Thanksgiving dinner when Marcus grabbed Danny's arm hard enough to leave a bruise. I described the brochures for memory care facilities that appeared around the house like threats. I described the conference room where Marcus told me I had nothing left, that Danny didn't remember who I was half the time, that it didn't matter who signed the checks. The defense attorney tried to shake my testimony on cross-examination, suggested my memory was unreliable, implied I was bitter about losing my house. I answered each question the same way I'd run job sites for 40 years. Straight facts, no embellishment, no emotion. The attorney gave up after 20 minutes. On the 8th day, they brought Danny into the courtroom. He came in with his caregiver, a woman named Maria, who'd been working with him since Rachel arranged his placement. He wore the same kind of clothes he'd always worn. Work pants, flannel shirt, boots. He looked like the carpenter he used to be. The courtroom went quiet. Danny saw me in the front row and smiled. He raised his hand in a small wave. His left eye still drooped slightly from the nerve damage. "Dad," he said. His voice carried across the silent room. "Are we going somewhere? Just visiting, buddy?" I kept my voice steady. "Just visiting." He looked around at the wood paneling, the flags, the people in suits. "Is this a church?" Several jurors were crying. The prosecutor asked Danny simple questions. What he liked to do, whether he remembered his job, whether he remembered the accident. Danny answered like a child would. He talked about his lighthouse puzzle, about Maria, who made him pancakes in the morning, about the cartoons he watched in the common room. He didn't remember the accident, didn't remember falling, didn't remember the man he used to be. But when the prosecutor asked if he remembered his mother, Danny's face changed. "Mama," he said softly. "She sang songs. She smelled like flowers." He paused. "When is Mama coming home?" I closed my eyes. The scratch of the court reporter's keys filled the silence. The defense didn't cross-examine. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty. Criminal negligence, causing great bodily harm. Marcus stood at the defense table while the foreman read the verdict. His face was gray. His expensive suit hung loose on a frame that had lost weight during the trial. The soft hands that had never known a callus gripped the table edge. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. 4 years of a possible 6 in Wisconsin State Prison. Marcus, who wanted my house, lost his own to legal fees and the divorce settlement. Marcus, who called Danny not my problem, would spend 4 years in a cell thinking about consequences. Marcus, who threatened to put me in a nursing home, was the one being institutionalized. Jenna moved to Florida 3 weeks after the sentencing. A distant cousin had a spare room. She left without contesting custody of Emma. My daughter, who'd helped steal $43,000 from her father, who'd watched her husband abuse her brother, who'd chosen money over blood at every opportunity, abandoned her own child. The divorce had stripped her of assets. The publicity had stripped her of reputation. The evidence had stripped her of the victimhood she'd tried to claim. She was gone before spring. 6 months after the trial, a letter arrived. The envelope was heavy paper, cream-colored, with a Lake Geneva return address. Theodore Vance's estate. I picked it up from the kitchen table. The paper felt substantial in my hands, the kind of stationery that cost more per sheet than most people spent on a meal. The new kitchen, in the small house I'd purchased with trust income. A modest place with a garden out back, where I'd planted yellow roses like Linda's. The letter was handwritten. Shaky script, the kind that comes from age and failing health. But readable. Mr. Lindgren, I dictated this letter 3 days ago, knowing I won't live to see it delivered. Rachel tells me you've been found, that you were sleeping in your truck, caring for your injured son, while your own family stole from you. I spent 60 years in business. I met 10,000 people. Politicians, executives, developers, contractors. I watched them scheme and steal and justify their cruelty with words like leverage and necessity. You're the only one who gave back $4,000 they could have kept. That moment taught me something about integrity that made me my fortune. I learned to recognize honest men because I'd met one. I learned to distrust the schemers because I'd seen what honesty looked like. I only wish I could see your face when you learn what 43 years of remembered integrity bought you. Look after your boy. He's lucky to have you. Theodore Vance, November 2025. I set the letter down. Through the kitchen window, I could see Danny in the backyard. He was helping the gardener plant bulbs. His hands moved in the dirt with the same patience they'd shown when he was a carpenter. He looked up, saw me watching, and waved. I waved back. The letter went into the wooden box with my grandfather's plumb bob and Linda's folding ruler. 3 generations of honest work. And now a dying man's testament to what that honesty had meant. $4,000, returned in 1983. $4.5 million, received in 2025. The math didn't matter. What mattered was simpler. A man I'd met for 5 minutes remembered me for 43 years because I'd done the right thing when no one was watching. Marcus Brennan had spent his whole life calculating angles and leverage and profit margins. He'd ended up in a prison cell, divorced, disgraced, and alone. I'd spent my life keeping my word and protecting my people. I'd ended up with a house, a garden, a grandson's custody, and a son who smiled when he saw me. The honest foreman, the man who gave back the wallet. I looked out the window again. Danny was showing the gardener how to pack the soil around a bulb. His hands steady, his face content. The afternoon sun caught the yellow roses along the fence, the same shade Linda had planted 40 years ago. I picked up my coffee cup and walked outside to join my son in the garden. Before we go further, please like and tell me, 1 to 10, how's my revenge so far? I want to know. The Craftsman bungalow sat on a corner lot 3 blocks from the house I'd built in 1982. Smaller. Less traffic on the corner. Mine. I'd found it the spring after the verdict. A widow's estate sale. Her children lived in California and wanted quick cash more than family memories. The bones were good. Oak floors, plaster walls. A basement that stayed dry. A garage with enough space for a workbench. Yellow roses went in that first spring. The same shade as Linda's, the ones Marcus tore out. I planted them along the south fence, where they'd get afternoon sun. Danny helped me dig the holes. His hands moved through the dirt with the same patience they'd shown when he was a carpenter. Now it was October, nearly a year since the arrest. Nearly a year since everything changed. I sat on the front porch, watching the sun drop behind the neighbor's maple. The screen door stood open behind me. Inside, Danny and Emma were watching cartoons. Their laughter drifted out, mixing with the cricket sounds and the smell of cut grass. Emma had covered my refrigerator with drawings. Stick figures holding hands. Houses with smoke from chimneys. Yellow suns in corners. She'd started adding a figure labeled Great-Grandma Linda, watching from clouds. She was 10 now. Taller. Her front teeth had come in. She still loved puppies and crayon drawings, but she'd started asking harder questions too. About her father. About why he was in prison. About what he'd done. I answered as honestly as I could. Some truths a child needs to hear from someone who loves them. Joint custody had come through in May. Jenna didn't contest it. She'd fled to Florida before the paperwork was even filed, running from the publicity, the shame, the evidence of her own choices. My daughter, who'd helped steal $43,000 from her father, abandoned her own child rather than face what she'd done. Emma deserved better. Now she had it. Saturday mornings, we worked in the garage. My grandfather's tools hung on the pegboard above the workbench. The brass plumb bob, the Stanley No. 4 plane, the folding ruler with Linda's initials. 3 generations of honest work, displayed where Emma could see them. Last Saturday, I'd shown her how to hold a hammer. Not the way children swing them, wild and off-center. The proper grip. Fingers wrapped around the handle's end for leverage. Eyes on the nail, not the hammerhead. Let gravity do half the work. She'd driven 3 nails into a scrapboard. Not straight, but solid. Her face lit up when the 3rd one sank flush. I did it, Grandpa, you did. Danny had held the board steady while she worked. His hands knew what to do, even when his mind didn't remember why. He'd smiled the whole time, happy to be useful, happy to be part of something. Rachel's trust covered his care. Professional caregivers came to the house daily. Physical therapy twice a week. Occupational therapy on Thursdays. He'd never be the carpenter he was before the accident, but he was safe. Fed, warm, treated like a person instead of a problem. He still asked for Linda sometimes. Less often now. When he did, I told him she loved him, that she was proud of him, that she was watching from somewhere we couldn't see. Maybe she was. Linda's locket hung around my neck now, not from the rearview mirror anymore. Not watching over homelessness and rest stops and nights in a freezing truck cab. Watching over home. I touched it. The gold was warm from my skin. The screen door creaked. Emma appeared on the porch, her face flushed from laughing. Grandpa, Uncle Danny says he's hungry. Can we have ice cream? After dinner. She grinned and disappeared back inside. A moment later, I heard her explaining the rules to Danny. His voice answered, cheerful and accepting. They'd figured out their own rhythm, these two. The 10-year-old and the man with a 7-year-old's mind. They played board games together. Watched cartoons. Built towers out of blocks and knocked them down. Family. The sunset painted the roses orange. The same shade they'd turned every October since Linda planted the first ones 40 years ago. Marcus Brennan had asked me once what 40 years of integrity had bought me. He'd said it with contempt, with calculation, with the certainty that money was the only measure of a man. He was serving his 3rd year now. 1 more to go, if he didn't make parole. His company was gone. His wife was gone. His reputation was gone. I had a house, a garden, a son who smiled when he saw me, a granddaughter who ran to me every other Friday when her ride dropped her off. Integrity bought time. Time bought patience. Patience bought justice. Justice bought this. I sat on my porch and watched the light fade. The crickets sang. The roses glowed. Inside, Emma's laughter mixed with Danny's, and the screen door stood open to let the evening in.